On October 18, 2025, chaos erupted inside Estadio Huracán in Buenos Aires. Axl Rose, the icon who once made the world bow before Welcome to the Jungle, suddenly hurled his microphone and kicked over the drum kit of new drummer Isaac Carpenter, right in front of tens of thousands of screaming fans. It lasted only a few seconds, yet it was enough to resurrect the memory of the mad demon of the 1990s, the man who once turned concerts into literal battlefields. From a boy beaten in Indiana to the fiercest voice of Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose has lived his entire life on the edge between genius and self-destruction. 30 years after the infamous St. Louis riot, the wild man of Guns N' Roses still refuses to bow down. He's older now, his voice rougher, but the fire in his eyes has never gone out. And that moment of chaos once again reopened an old question. Axl Rose, a cursed genius, or a man forever incapable of living in peace with himself? To find the answer, we have to return to the beginning, to the place where a boy, beaten and told that music is a sin, turned pain into a scream that made the whole world fall silent. Axl Rose was not born into music, but into violence and blind faith. He came into the world on February 6, 1962, in Lafayette, Indiana, a small town where people believed that fear was the path to God. But for young William Bruce Rose Jr., fear was hell. His biological father left when he was only 2, but not quietly. According to Axl, that man had once kidnapped and abused him. It was a memory without words, only fragments, a syringe, a sharp pain, and the helpless face of his mother. That mother, Sharon, soon remarried Stephen Bailey, a fanatic Pentecostal who turned their small household into a temple of punishment. He forced Axl to take his surname, controlled everything in the house, from clothes to hairstyle, even to thoughts. Music was forbidden, the TV was burned, and anything joyful was considered sinful. Axl once said, "The Bible was shoved down my throat every day. They taught me that fear was righteous. But I never thought living in fear was healthy." Worse still, Axl witnessed his stepfather abusing his half-sister for nearly 2 decades, while he himself was beaten for not being godly enough. In a world where prayer replaced love, violence became the only language he understood. At school, Axl was the odd one out, bullied, dismissed, but carrying within him a weapon no one expected: his voice. In the church choir, he could sing so high that the entire room would fall silent. For the first time, he felt power, not through fists, but through sound. Yet the suffocating control at home only grew worse. He was forced to pray for hours, to listen to his stepfather's sermons about the devil hidden in rock music, while the real evil lived under the same roof. At 17, after refusing to cut his hair, Axl was thrown out of the house. From then on, he drifted. Lafayette police records listed more than 20 arrests of the troubled teenager for drinking, fighting, disorderly conduct, or simply for looking different. But behind that criminal record was just a boy trying to escape a spiritual prison. In December 1982, Axl decided to leave Lafayette, abandon the name William Bailey, which he saw as a curse, and chose a new one for himself: Axl Rose. A name he created not to be famous, but to be free. From that moment, the journey of the outcast began, and the world was about to witness one of the most powerful voices in rock history, born from the ruins of fear itself. When the old bus stopped in the middle of the night in Los Angeles, Axl Rose had nothing but a backpack, a few coins, and a vague belief that music would save him. But LA in the early 1980s was no promised land. It was a battlefield. The city overflowed with dreamers sleeping on sidewalks, playing in dingy bars, hoping a record executive might just walk in. Axl was one of them, skinny, stubborn, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights and hunger. In those early days, he did every odd job he could find, washing dishes, unloading trucks, even selling tickets at a movie theater just to pay rent for a shabby room he shared with a few musician friends. But every night, when the neon lights of Sunset Strip flickered on, he stepped into another world, a world of sweat, cheap whiskey, and music, the only thing that made people feel alive. Axl sang anywhere there was a microphone, from clubs no bigger than a living room to bars with only a few drunken patrons. What set him apart wasn't just his voice, but the way he lived in every note, as if each song were his last outburst of rage. From Rapid Fire to AXL, then Hollywood Rose, Axl slowly found kindred spirits. Especially Izzy Stradlin, his childhood friend from Lafayette. Both were broke, eating leftovers, sleeping in cars, but they shared a dream: to create a kind of hybrid rock, not as chaotic as punk, not as glossy as glam metal. What they wanted was truth, raw, romantic, dangerous, music that could make people want to cry and destroy everything around them at the same time. Then one night, in a small Hollywood club, fate appeared. Axl met Slash, the guitarist with wild curls and a playing style that made the strings seem to catch fire. Soon came Duff McKagan, the punk-hearted bassist from Seattle, and Steven Adler, the baby-faced drummer who played like a storm. In 1985, 5 wandering souls came together and named their band Guns N' Roses. From gigs at the Troubadour and Whiskey A Go-Go to the night they signed with Geffen Records, everything unfolded like an explosion. No spotlight was waiting for them, but the audience could feel something radio had never dared to broadcast. Anger turned into music, led by a frontman screaming as if every song were his final escape. Axl didn't just sing. He became his nightmares, transforming them into a force that no one could look away from. None of them knew that moment. Between the guitars, the screams, and the haze of cheap liquor was when the miracle began, and when the curse was quietly born. Because for Axl Rose, every miracle comes with a price, and the world was about to see just how heavy that price could be. In 1987, Guns N' Roses released Appetite for Destruction, an album no label expected to succeed, no radio dared to play, and no critic believed would survive the summer. But within months, every prediction was shattered. Welcome to the jungle, sweet child of mine, Paradise City. 3 bullets that blew apart the wall separating underground from mainstream. The album sold over 30 million copies, becoming the best-selling debut in U.S. history and turning 5 starving drifters from Los Angeles into global icons. But glory always walks hand in hand with darkness. At the 1988 Donington Festival, while Axl screamed, "You know where you are? You're in the jungle, baby!" 2 fans were crushed to death in the crowd. The police found no fault in the band, but Axl knew what had just happened. From that night on, every time he stepped on stage, he carried those 2 shadows with him, like spirits clinging to each note he sang. 3 years later, in 1991, Guns N' Roses returned with Use Your Illusion I and II, twin albums that debuted at #1 and #2 on the Billboard chart in the same week, a feat even the Beatles had never achieved. Ballads like Don't Cry, November Rain, and Estranged revealed Axl as a romantic poet hidden inside a rebel shell. Meanwhile, You Could Be Mine thundered through Terminator 2, cementing his image as part of global pop culture. But the brighter the lights, the longer the shadow. Axl became both god and demon at once, a perfection-obsessed genius who controlled everything until no one in the band knew where they stood. Slash drank heavily. Steven Adler fell into drugs. And Axl, chronically late canceling shows, screaming at crews, was labeled by the media as rock's most dangerous diva. To the public, he was every promoter's nightmare. To himself, it was merely survival. In a world where everyone wanted to grab the mic from his hands, Axl held it tighter. So tight it seemed he might choke on his own screams. Because behind the lights, applause isn't always glory. Sometimes it's just an echo from the abyss, slowly swallowing what's left of Axl Rose's soul. And this time, that abyss would devour the very band he once called family. In July 1991, St. Louis descended into chaos. In the middle of Guns N' Roses' performance of Rocket Queen, Axl Rose spotted a fan with a camera in the front row. He jumped off the stage, dove into the crowd, and tried to grab it. When security intervened, Axl threw his microphone, stormed off stage, and thousands of furious fans erupted. The riot lasted for hours. Over 60 people were injured, dozens of police cars smashed. The world called it the St. Louis riot, and for the public, Axl Rose officially became the enemy of rock and roll. A year later, in Montreal, 1992, fate repeated itself. Metallica canceled their set after a stage accident. The audience waited 2 hours for Guns N' Roses. When Axl finally appeared, his voice was strained, his temper short, and halfway through the show, he walked off again. The crowd rioted, torched the stage, and once again, Axl disappeared into the smoke. No one knew then that his throat was torn and bleeding, but the media didn't care about reasons. As long as there was blood, it was news. The outbursts continued like a chain reaction. Atlanta 1987, Phoenix 1998, Norway 2006. Wherever Axl went, the line between performance and violence blurred. Behind the scenes, he was still obsessed with sound, fine-tuning every guitar tone and drum beat. But the smallest mistake could ignite his fury. Axl didn't just sing, he performed. He became the immortal rebel. And sometimes, that role devoured the man behind it. Even his personal life became a battleground. In 1990, a fight with a neighbor led to his arrest, inspiring the song Right Next Door to Hell, seen as musical revenge. Another track, One in a Million, sparked outrage for allegedly racist and homophobic lyrics. Axl denied the accusations, but the image stuck. The arrogant, untamed, unapologetic frontman of Guns N' Roses. The breaking point came with Nirvana. Axl admired Kurt Cobain, but when Cobain refused to share a tour, the tension exploded into public insults. Two men, one haunted by his past, the other tormented by his present, never made peace before Cobain took his own life in 1994. Amid the noise, Axl went silent. No screams, no defenses, just disappearance. For once, he didn't fight back, carrying a private guilt no one could see. Because sometimes what kills an artist isn't the criticism. It's the silence after the music stops. And in that silence, a new Axl Rose, lonely, haunted, and stranger than ever, began to take shape. Yet, no one could have imagined that his rebirth would take over a decade, long enough for the world to believe he was gone. After the peak years of glory, Guns N' Roses began to fracture, not because of music, but because of people. Endless late-night recording sessions, exhausting tours, addictions, and egos swelling under fame. Everyone drifted apart. At the center stood Axl Rose, both the flame that warmed and the fire that burned everything down. Steven Adler, the drummer from Hollywood's rough streets, brought reckless freedom to GNR's sound. He was the first to fall. The pace of touring crushed him. Heroin took the rest. He was fired after failing to finish Civil War. Adler collapsed, and Axl, to outsiders, looked merciless. But behind the scenes, he quietly paid Adler's hospital bills. Axl's compassion always hid behind steel armor, so well that few ever recognized it. Izzy Stradlin, co-founder and Axl's mirror image, saw more clearly than anyone the torment consuming his friend. He watched Axl become a dictator on stage, controlling everything from drum volume to what his bandmates wore. One day after a show in Chicago, Izzy packed his bags and left without a word. He only said one cold line: "It's not fun anymore." For Axl, it was the first knife through his faith. Then came Slash, the soul of the Les Paul, the man who had created Sweet Child O' Mine and Paradise City with Axl. They had once been perfect halves. One screamed, one blazed, but success drove them apart. Slash wanted Guns N' Roses to remain pure rock. Axl envisioned grand orchestrations, pianos, strings, and classical drama. They argued, slammed doors, and stopped speaking in the studio. In 1996, Slash left. No one cried. GNR's tears had long since dried. Duff McKagan, the quiet heartbeat of the band, had been the glue keeping them alive through every war. But when he left in 1997, Guns N' Roses lost its last balance. No one was left to calm Axl's rage or remind him that friendship is part of music. By the late 1990s, Guns N' Roses was no longer a band. It was a ruined kingdom, with one lonely king sitting on a throne built from memories and pain. Axl held on to the name not for money, not fame, but because he couldn't bear the thought that it had all been just a dream. But fame protects no one from truth. As the new century began, Axl Rose, the man who once made the world tremble to welcome to the jungle, spent more time in lawyers' offices than studios. The 2000s weren't an era of creativity. They were years of lawsuits, accusations, and betrayal, as if the world itself demanded he pay for his past glory. In 2004-2005, Geffen Records released greatest hits without his consent. To the public, it was just a compilation. To Axl, it was a wound. Every song on that album was tied to people who had left him. He couldn't stand seeing Guns N' Roses past packaged, labeled classic, and sold like a souvenir. He sued Geffen, accusing them of stealing royalties, but deep down, it was an act of desperation to protect the last piece of his identity: control. Then came 2010. Axl clashed with Irving Azoff, the legendary manager who had once helped rebuild his empire, and Live Nation, the tour giant. He accused them of betrayal, of pressuring him into a reunion he wasn't ready for. Behind that lawsuit lay one painful truth. Axl no longer trusted anyone. He won partially, but at the cost of complete isolation from the industry. People avoided working with him. No one wanted to risk having a boardroom turn into a battlefield. In 2013, another fight erupted, this time with Activision. Axl discovered Slash's image, his former other half, used in Guitar Hero 3 without his permission. It sounded trivial, but to Axl, it was a matter of honor. He couldn't bear seeing the man who had abandoned him tied to the Guns N' Roses name. 3 years of legal warfare followed. When the court dismissed his case, Axl said nothing. No statements, no tweets, just another silent defeat added to his long list of battles no one won. Then, in 2016, the internet struck again. The Fat Axl memes went viral, mocking his heavier figure on tour. Once the embodiment of lust and chaos, he was now a punchline. That same year, Chris Pittman, a former keyboardist, sued him for $125,000 in unpaid wages. A small sum, yet enough to drag his image lower. A rock king surrounded by lawyers, paperwork, and loneliness. And still, through all the mockery, lawsuits, and ruins, Axl Rose never let go of the name Guns N' Roses. To the world, it was stubbornness. To him, it was survival, the last breath of his identity. Because when everyone else left, that name was the only proof that it had all been real. But that loyalty was also his chain, dragging him back to the past every time he tried to move forward. And from the ashes of defeat, bitterness, and isolation, Axl Rose would make the world bow again. Not through scandal, not through rage, but through a miracle no one dared believe could happen. After the empire of Guns N' Roses collapsed, Axl Rose withdrew to his seaside mansion in Malibu, a house where the curtains were always drawn, and the only sounds that echoed were drums, guitars, and screams recorded over and over until the air itself felt suffocated. From 1994 to 2008, he all but vanished from the world, becoming more myth than man, a rumor, a ghost, a question. No one knew what he was doing, only that Axl was obsessed with a project he called the final salvation of his life, Chinese democracy. For 15 years, dozens of musicians came and went. Buckethead, the guitarist with a KFC bucket on his head and fingers that moved like blades of wind. Robin Fink, formerly of 9 Inch Nails, Tommy Stinson of The Replacements, all were recruited, replaced, then replaced again. Each told the same story. He was never satisfied. Every drum beat had to be redone 10 times. Every vocal line adjusted to the breath. Sometimes he rewrote entire songs because one word didn't feel honest enough. Geffen Records was patient at first, then nervous, then desperate. The budget ballooned past $13 million, making it one of the most expensive albums in music history. Producers were replaced one after another. Demo tracks leaked. Yet Axl insisted it wasn't time yet. He wasn't making music to release. He was making music to survive, like a man running from the echo of his own past. By November 2008, Chinese democracy finally saw daylight. No grand fanfare, no triumphant press tour, just a wave of curiosity and doubt. It sold 260,000 copies in its first week, modest by Guns N' Roses standards. Critics were divided. Some called it bold, others the obsolete child of obsession. But beneath the criticism, Chinese democracy was not a failure. It was a confession, a somber self-portrait of a man at war with himself, with his past, his isolation, and his fear that everything once magnificent had become a distant echo. Every track wasn't made to conquer anyone, only to prove that Axl Rose was still alive. And no one could have imagined that from the ashes of an album the world dismissed as a failure, he was preparing for a resurrection that would leave everyone speechless. When Chinese democracy closed amid waves of controversy, many believed Axl Rose was just a madman haunted by his past. But in truth, his obsession didn't begin in the studio. It began long before that, with a love that seemed destined to save him, yet ended up leaving the deepest wound of his life. Back in the late 1980s, when Guns N' Roses had just begun to shake Los Angeles, Axl met Erin Everly, a 19-year-old girl with eyes as soft as a song. Erin wasn't a stranger to music. She was the daughter of Don Everly, one half of the legendary Everly Brothers. Born into fame, she was quiet and fragile, the opposite of the chaotic, smoky world Axl lived in. Their meeting felt like fate, two broken souls believing they could fix each other. Axl was torn between his rising fame and old wounds that never healed, while Erin, innocent and hopeful, thought love could calm any storm. They fell into each other like two people in free fall, brilliant, fierce, and doomed. Axl wrote "Sweet Child O' Mine" for her, the only love song in his career that truly carried the breath of hope. But if the melody was love, the lyrics were a cry for help. To Axl, Aaron was the sweet child, the first light he had ever seen after a lifetime of darkness. In 1990, they married impulsively in Las Vegas, just the two of them and a drunken night. No wedding dress, no guests, no plan, only blind faith that love could erase the past. But in Axl's world, love always meant fear. He loved so intensely that it turned to control. He couldn't bear the thought of being abandoned again, as everyone he'd ever trusted had once left him. The jealousy began as cracks and quickly grew into storms. Axl, haunted by betrayal, started controlling every detail of Erin's life. Where she went, who she met, what she said. A late phone call, a stranger's glance, anything could set him off. Erin, believing his anger came from pain, endured it quietly. But the more she stayed, the deeper she was pulled into a toxic spiral, where love and fear became two sides of the same coin. They fought constantly, then made up in long, tearful nights filled with apologies and promises. Some days Axl would hold her and cry like a child, saying she was the only one who made him feel safe. But when memories of his violent father surfaced, the rage came back, and he unleashed it on the woman who tried to love him. Erin left several times, but each time Axl found her, sobbing and begging, she returned. She believed love could heal him. Axl believed that if he held her tightly enough, he'd never be abandoned again. Then, tragedy struck. Erin became pregnant, but lost the baby. For Axl, it was a mortal blow. He spiraled into depression and panic, locking himself in the studio for days, replaying unfinished demos, trying to assign blame to himself, and then to the world. Erin, exhausted and hollow, could only stay silent. In rare recollections, she said, that's when everything started to fall apart. From that loss, their love twisted into something else. Axl was no longer the tender man who wrote Sweet Child of Mine, but a figure consumed by rage and paranoia. Their home in Hollywood Hills became a psychological prison. Erin later described being locked inside for days, beaten and threatened. She no longer recognized the man she had married. Every step, every breath was surrounded by fear. In 1991, Erin left, this time for good. Months later, she filed for divorce, and in 1994, she sued Axl Rose for physical and emotional abuse. In her court documents, she detailed suffocating days of confinement, bruises, and unpredictable outbursts. The case was settled privately, but it left a scar that never healed for either of them. For Erin, it was the end of a dark chapter. For Axl, it was total collapse. Not just losing the only woman he had ever truly loved, but losing his belief that love could save him. After that, he withdrew completely. Friends said Axl became cold, reclusive, and spoke only through his manager. He feared love itself, convinced that to love was to lose. In a 1992 interview, his voice trembling, Axl confessed, "I loved her so much it made me crazy. And when she left, a part of me died." To Axl, Erin Everly wasn't just the first woman he truly loved. She was the mirror reflecting everything he feared: abandonment, misunderstanding, and his own inability to control himself. After she left, he never wrote another love song. From Estranged to Coma, his music became silent confessions. The sound of a man trying to forgive himself, but never succeeding. When the world saw Axl Rose as wild, arrogant, and untamed, inside him, Erin Everly remained the deepest scar. And from that moment on, loneliness became the only love song Axl Rose would ever keep singing. If Axl Rose's love with Erin Everly was the first chapter, innocent yet wounded, then his relationship with Stephanie Seymour was the second, where love became a true battlefield. In 1991, as Guns N' Roses stood at the peak of global fame and Axl had just walked away from a shattered marriage, he met Stephanie Seymour on the set of the Don't Cry music video. At the time, Stephanie was one of the world's most celebrated supermodels, an icon of the Vogue era, the face of Victoria's Secret, and the woman every camera wanted. Axl, with his wild eyes and fractured soul, was instantly drawn to her. Stephanie, surrounded by the glittering but soulless world of fashion, was in turn captivated by Axl's dangerous vulnerability, a man who could burn bright or fall apart at any moment. They began dating, openly and passionately. Their love quickly spilled off the screen and into real life, a collision of rock and fashion, music, and runway lights. Stephanie wasn't just a lover. She became Axl's second muse. She appeared in two of Guns N' Roses' most iconic music videos, Don't Cry and November Rain, where she played the bride in a dreamlike wedding scene that would go down as the most iconic wedding in MTV history. That image, the white dress flowing in the rain, the piano of November Rain rising like a hymn, made many believe it wasn't just acting, and indeed, outside the cameras, they were engaged. Axl gave Stephanie a massive ruby ring, a symbol that he was ready once again to believe in love. But behind the romantic photos and glossy magazine spreads, the old nightmare returned. Axl, still haunted by past traumas, became consumed with jealousy and control. Stephanie, strong-willed and independent, refused to bend. They loved ferociously and fought even harder. Friends said their relationship was a constant pendulum of extremes. Wild parties followed by violent arguments, mornings where Axl would hold her and cry, and nights that ended with slamming doors and shattered glass. Their love was both passion and destruction, a tragedy replaying itself. 2 years later, everything exploded. Stephanie Seymour filed a lawsuit accusing Axl Rose of assault and threats, claiming he had beaten and endangered her. In response, Axl countersued for betrayal and deceit, alleging that she had cheated and deliberately damaged his reputation. The media devoured the chaos, branding it supermodel versus rocker, when love turns to war. Both eventually dropped their cases, but the wounds never healed. Neither spoke publicly again, but everyone close to them understood. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the collapse of what was left inside Axl. After Stephanie, Axl disappeared from romance entirely. No wife, no children, no public relationships. He built an invisible wall between himself and the world, a fortress no one dared to enter. Those who knew him said that after her, Axl became empty but calm, as if his heart had burned out one final time. Amid the endless noise of Los Angeles, he chose to live like a refugee from love itself, leaving behind 2 women who had tried to love him and 2 scars that never closed. From then on, Axl Rose never wrote about love again. Only cold, haunting ballads like Estranged remained, songs through which listeners could understand that sometimes what destroys a man isn't hatred, but the memory of a love that was once beautiful. After love fell apart and Guns N' Roses collapsed, Axl Rose entered a stretch of loss after loss. No friends, no family, and a world that seemed to be turning its back on him. In 1995, tragedy struck. Shannon Hoon, the lead singer of Blind Melon and one of Axl's few trusted friends, died of a drug overdose. Hoon had sung backup on Don't Cry, sat beside Axl through the sleepless nights of the Use Your Illusion sessions, and was one of the few who could make him laugh during his darkest times. His death shattered Axl. He didn't attend the funeral, didn't speak publicly, just locked himself inside his Malibu home for weeks. A year later, before the pain could fade, he lost his mother, Sharon, the woman who had endured a hellish marriage and stood between religion and violence to protect her son. She passed away quietly, and many said Axl never got the chance to say goodbye. It became the most silent wound of his life. In 1997, another old friend, West Arkeen, co-writer of It's So Easy, died of a drug overdose. In less than 3 years, 3 of the people closest to Axl were gone forever. From then on, he withdrew completely. No public appearances, no interviews, no trust. In truth, his relationship with the media had already fallen apart long before. His 1992 Rolling Stone interview was a disaster. He arrived late, lost his temper midway, and stormed out when asked about his past and mental health. After that, Axl cut off nearly all contact with journalists. He trusted no one, and perhaps he no longer trusted himself. When he finally faced the press again in 2002 to promote the Chinese Democracy Tour, he was still the same defiant, defensive man. Sitting before dozens of reporters, he answered every question with sarcasm or suspicion. No smile, only a cold, distant stare. The conference ended in tense silence. No one dared ask more. It wasn't until 2012, in a rare interview with USA Today, that Axl allowed himself to look back. When asked about his notorious late concert starts, which had once driven fans to riots, he admitted, "I guess that was an expensive tuition for my lack of control." A short sentence, but one of the few times Axl ever accepted blame. As if he were speaking not to the public, but to his younger self. Then, fate played its cruel game again. In 2014, Concert Hotels released a study ranking the vocal ranges of rock singers, and Axl Rose was placed number 1, surpassing Freddie Mercury, Mariah Carey, and Prince. His voice spanned 6 octaves, from a deep F1 to a piercing B6, a range almost unheard of in the history of popular music. Ironically, the man once dismissed as lost, unstable, and past his prime was now honored for the very thing he'd used to scream against the world: his voice. Yet even in that triumph, Axl never truly returned. Glory had become a beautiful shell around a soul turned to stone, and deep down, he remained the man standing amid the ashes of his past, listening to the echoes of those who were gone, and to the faint sound of his own voice from the days when he still knew how to love. By 2015, when most people believed Axl Rose had shut the door on the world for good, he resurfaced in a way no one expected, through a letter to the president of Indonesia. In it, Axl protested the death sentences of 2 Australian citizens in the Bali 9 drug trafficking case. The voice once known for rebellion now wrote with restraint and reason, pleading for compassion and forgiveness. No one expected the man who once sparked riots in stadiums to speak out for the sanctity of life. But perhaps, after years of watching death surround him, friends, family, and the man he used to be, Axl had come to understand that violence was never the answer. That letter wasn't just a political statement, it was proof that somewhere beneath the armor of solitude, his heart could still feel. Then, just a year later, the impossible happened. In 2016, the world was stunned to see Slash and Duff McKagan, the very bandmates who had once left him in bitterness, standing beside Axl on stage. The Not in This Lifetime tour wasn't merely a reunion. It was an act of redemption. Wounds 2 decades deep were suddenly stitched together by music. When Axl sang Sweet Child O' Mine and Slash tore through his solo under red lights, millions of fans around the world erupted, not just from nostalgia, but because they were witnessing a miracle of time itself. The tour lasted more than 3 years, grossing over $580 million, becoming one of the 3 highest-grossing tours in music history. But for Axl, the number mattered less than the moment he stepped off stage, looked left, and saw Slash smiling, a smile he once thought he'd never see again. It wasn't just a band reunion, it was a man's salvation. That same year, Axl shocked the world once more, joining AC/DC to replace Brian Johnson, who was forced to quit touring due to hearing loss. Many doubted him, insisting no one could replace such a voice. But when Axl walked onto the stage in Lisbon, all doubts vanished. He didn't try to become Brian Johnson. He became the Axl Rose version of AC/DC, powerful, disciplined, and respectful. Critics who had trashed him for decades now called him the most astonishing comeback artist of the century. The man once branded a dangerous diva now stood in the front lines of two of the greatest bands in rock history, celebrated across the world. After decades of self-imposed exile in the dark, Axl Rose had finally found himself again. Not through apologies, but through music and the quiet wisdom of a man who had walked through every storm. In that moment, the world realized the rocker who once terrified everyone was, in truth, just a soul longing for forgiveness, and one who still loved music more than anything else. After reclaiming the world's stages, Axl proved he was never a man who lived off his past. In 2021, after nearly 2 decades of studio silence, he and Guns N' Roses released 2 new songs, Absurd and Hard School. They weren't radio hits or nostalgia plays. They were declarations that Guns N' Roses still lived, and Axl still burned. Absurd was raw and sarcastic, echoing his old anti-establishment edge, while Hard School carried the urgency and fury of the Use Your Illusion era. After years of being labeled a sleeping legend, Axl made the world admit he had never really gone. He had simply learned how to control the storm. A year later, in 2022, Guns N' Roses' music thundered through theaters worldwide in Marvel's Thor: Love and Thunder. 5 classic songs, including Welcome to the Jungle and Sweet Child O' Mine, were featured in the soundtrack. Marvel even named Heimdall's son Axl, a tribute to him. It was a rare moment, a dangerous rock icon immortalized at the heart of mainstream pop culture, where a new generation heard November Rain without knowing its creator once lived in his own private hell. But, as always, controversy found him. In November of that same year, during a show in Adelaide, Australia, Axl threw his microphone into the crowd, a trademark finale, but this time it hit a female fan in the face, injuring her. The story spread across social media, and for one of the few times in his career, Axl publicly apologized, saying he never wanted anyone to get hurt in the joy of music. It wasn't just an apology, it was proof of a man who had changed, who now knew when to stop before the storm took him again. That same year, Axl appeared in the most unexpected place, the world of animation. He voiced a cartoon version of himself in Looney Tunes and Scooby-Doo. A quirky, self-deprecating rock hero riding a motorcycle, saving Scooby and Shaggy from danger. Fans laughed, and many were moved. Because only someone who had truly made peace with his past could turn himself into a joke and feel no pain. But as fate would have it, the shadows returned once more. In late 2023, Axl Rose was sued under New York's Adult Survivors Act by former Playboy model Sheila Kennedy, who alleged that Axl had sexually assaulted her in 1989 when both were at the height of fame. Axl denied all allegations and filed a motion to dismiss in early 2024, claiming the accusations were false, unproven, and beyond the statute of limitations. Though the case remains under review, it resurrected the same haunting question that has followed him for decades. Was Axl Rose a victim of his era or its creation? An artist defined by anger and punished by it. And so, in his 60s, in the age of social media, Axl Rose, the man who once terrified the world, now faces the harshest version of modern justice. One where every wound of the past can be reopened, no matter how many years have passed. Yet through old scandals or new storms, he still stands on stage, still grips the microphone, still sings. Because for Axl Rose, music is the only place where the truth can't be distorted. After years of being praised for one of the most remarkable comebacks in rock history, Axl Rose once again faced a battle no guitar riff or spotlight could save him from: his own body. In 2024, at the height of Guns N' Roses' post-reunion tour, Axl began suffering serious vocal problems. The voice, once ranked as the widest range in rock, began to falter. Hoarseness mid-song, cracked high notes, coughing between verses. He tried to push through, but eventually had to cancel a string of shows across Europe and South America. Fans worried. The media pounced. Headlines screamed, "Is this the end of Guns N' Roses?" But Axl didn't give up. In a rare social media post, he promised fans he would return after full recovery, calling it a duty to the audience and to myself. And true to his word, months later he was back, thinner, calmer, and carrying a new energy, not defiance, but control. In early 2025, Guns N' Roses announced a new tour with a long, cryptic title. Because what you want and what you get are two completely different things. It sounded like a late confession that his life had been a series of things not as expected, but he still had to keep singing. The tour kicked off on May 1st in Incheon, South Korea, and ran through 30 cities, closing at Wacken Open Air in Germany on July 31st. It also introduced a new drummer, Isaac Carpenter, formerly of AWOL Nation and Filter, replacing Frank Ferrer. With this lineup, GNR felt recharged, fast, sharp, and powerful, as if they were 30 again. But fate never lets Axl rest. On October 18, 2025, during a show in Buenos Aires, chaos struck again. In the middle of Welcome to the Jungle, his in-ear monitor malfunctioned, the sound signal cutting in and out, leaving him unable to hear his own voice. For a few fleeting seconds, the man who once commanded hell itself lost the heartbeat of the stage. He threw his microphone to the floor, turned, and kicked Isaac Carpenter's drum kit before storming off stage. The crowd froze in disbelief. The band fell silent, then tried to keep playing. Within hours, international media declared Axl Rose's meltdown returns. Outlets that once hailed his redemption now questioned everything. Had the old demon ever really left Axl Rose? Or had it just been sleeping, waiting for the next spark? But those who truly understood him knew it wasn't just another meltdown. It was the reaction of a man who had lived his entire life through sound, and in losing it, even for a moment, lost a piece of himself. Axl Rose has always been a creature of extremes. He loves completely, rages completely, and when the stage catches fire, he burns with it, knowing each time it costs him another piece of his soul. When the lights went dark in Buenos Aires, no one knew if Axl would return. But for this man, silence has never been the end. As he once said before the tour began, "What you want and what you get. Sometimes they're just two sides of the same note." After more than 4 decades weathering the storms of fame, Axl Rose today is no longer the blood-fueled rocker with whiskey and cigarettes in hand, but a man learning to live slower, to listen to himself after years of chaos. Now in his 60s, his net worth is estimated at around $200 million, a large sum, though most of it lies not in luxury but in what he calls his places of refuge. He owns 3 primary homes, a villa in Malibu overlooking the Pacific, his former Hollywood Hills estate, where Use Your Illusion was recorded, and the Latigo Canyon house, built in the 1920s. A house that keeps secrets, he calls it. He also maintains a penthouse in New York City for long tours, a private retreat few have ever entered. Yet Axl remains a man of speed. His garage resembles a museum of controlled chaos and craftsmanship. A Porsche 918 Spider, Ferrari Enzo, and Carrera GT, each representing a different era of his life. Friends say he chooses cars, like he chooses songs, not to show off, but to feel alive while everything is still moving. Those who've met Axl in recent years all say the same thing. He's changed. No more sleepless nights, no sudden outbursts. Instead, morning meditation and Tai Chi, light wine instead of whiskey, and a new habit, philosophy books. On the table by his Malibu window lie dog-eared copies of Nietzsche, Vonnegut, and sci-fi novels, stacked beside old lyric sheets and boxes of throat lozenges. For all his history of rage and rebellion, Axl has a surprisingly gentle side. He keeps several dogs, and even a pet snake named Slash, part joke, part irony. He quietly supports AIDS relief and animal welfare organizations, donating without publicity. His diet is now partially vegetarian, avoiding red meat, cutting down on alcohol and cigarettes, something fans once thought impossible. Doctors say his voice has weakened with age, but Axl still sings, still burns, even if he sometimes runs short on breath at the highest notes. Perhaps because within that voice, there still lingers the soul of the boy from Indiana, the one who once believed music could save the world, before realizing the thing that needed saving most was himself. On quiet mornings in Malibu, Axl Rose often sits watching the ocean, waves that never stop, yet are never the same. And like those waves, he keeps going, no longer furious but still alive, still echoing with the sound of a time that will never come again. When people talk about Axl Rose, two parallel and opposing images always coexist. One is the rebel on stage, the man who once made thousands collapse in screams and fire. The other is the lonely man sitting in the darkness after the show, wondering if he has gone too far to ever come back. But perhaps it is precisely that contradiction that forms his true legacy. Axl is not just the voice of Guns N' Roses, he is the soul of an era, a time when rock was a battle between instinct and reason, between freedom and self-destruction. He turned rage into art, wounds into music, and loneliness into a declaration of life. With songs like Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, November Rain, and Don't Cry, Axl reached something few artists ever dare to confront, pain too deep for words. Many have tried to define him by scandal, but music history defines Axl by an influence that cannot be erased. Generations of artists after him, from Kurt Cobain and Chester Bennington to Billie Joe Armstrong, carry traces of Axl within them, that mixture of longing for freedom and fear of being hurt. New generations of listeners, who never experienced Appetite for Destruction when it first came out, still know every line of November Rain, a hymn in the storm for those who have lost, yet still want to believe in love. Axl Rose was never a perfect hero. He is a deeply flawed man, with a violent past, unpredictable anger, and a heart too big to ever find peace. But that is exactly why he lives on. Not in monuments, but in the moments when fans close their eyes and whisper just one line, "Don't you cry tonight." Today, in a world of polished and predictable music, Axl Rose remains a symbol of raw truth, that an artist doesn't need to be perfect, only brave enough to live honestly with the fire inside. From the abused boy in Indiana to the man who now holds a fortune and an unrepeatable legacy, his journey stands as proof of rock's greatest paradox: that salvation sometimes rises from destruction itself. And when the lights fade, Slash's guitar falls silent, and Axl's raspy voice trembles through those final notes, we finally understand that the greatest thing he ever left behind was not fame, but faith. The faith that even the most broken souls can create something eternal. And what about you? When you listen to November Rain today, do you still feel that voice carrying the warmth of a man trying to forgive himself? If you do, leave a comment as a tribute to Axl Rose, the man who turned pain into melody and made the world fall silent just to listen.